Hello, everyone. I am going to kick off now. So welcome to the Kubernetes 127 retrospective. Just as a couple of notes, this is different to the online retros. So we've already had one online retro for 127. We will have more. I need to schedule them, but there will be at least one more online. We're not going to be using the same doc as we used for the online retro. So there are still some points of discussion which we haven't gone through on there. If you want to discuss them here today, completely fine. Put them down and we can discuss them. If they don't come up, that's fine. My plan was, seeing as we are all in person, to do this a bit more kind of traditional retro style. So the idea is I have some Post-it notes, I have some pens, and I have some Sharpies that I've stolen from the previous speaker. And we can do this in Post-it note style. So if people want to come up and grab Post-it notes and start writing down things, we're going to do about 10 minutes. I'm thinking we'll do this in the stop, start, continue style. So write the things that you want to talk about in like a stop doing something, start doing something, or continue doing something. I appreciate that you can more or less massage any point into any of those, but whichever you think is most appropriate. If you see a point that you agree with, either put another Post-it note next to it with a +1, or just write it again, and we'll do some grouping afterwards. And after 10 minutes, we'll group them together, and then we'll basically just find the points with the most stuff, most +1s on them, or the most iterated versions of it. And we'll talk about things, and we'll time box each thing to 5-10 minutes, and we'll get through as many as we can. And if a thing overruns, we'll shove it on the doc to talk about it later, and the things that we don't get to talk about, we'll shove them on the doc to talk about later. Everyone happy? Any questions? Concerns? Comments? Question?
Hi, I'm from the Ministry of Funny Hats. Okay, no joke is worth repeating, so I won't. Normally, I would ask for a note taker, just to be sure there is a note taker. And
Grace
as long
will be a
as there
note
is a note taker, I don't have to say the rest of what I was going to say. But we'll probably make it a little bit easier by also including a photograph of the Post-its.
Yes, my plan was to take a photograph of everything at the end, and also Grace has kindly volunteered, because I kind of moaned in her vicinity that we didn't have a note taker. She volunteered herself to take notes for this, which
Good.
we'll...
Then other than sticking 5 fingers in the air sometime later, my job is done.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. All right, in which case, 10 minutes starts now. Come up and grab stuff. In terms of the three, we'll put them on these 3 tables. So I'll write a Post-it note for each, but that's the idea. Everyone got it? Cool.
Which is which?
Are there colors?
I would.
The colors mean nothing.
Oh, do we not?
This table says,
I thought they were color coded.
stop, start, continue.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry.
Use whatever color you feel like. Whichever one falls to you. Also got a sticker if you haven't already.
They're amazing. It's such a good sticker.
Right.
We will go until the hour, because that is 10 minutes. Tables matter. Tables matter. Colors are just, I just have to pick one of the color pack. Yeah, can't stop anything else. Feel free to come up and put them on the table as we go through, by the way. You don't have to wait till the end.
What does start mean?
What should we do? Like, what's a new idea?
Oh, let's see. Plus ones on these?
Yeah, grab a post-it note and plus one some stuff, or just write +1 on the post-it note.
I'm just gonna write plus one on it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I don't know where.
These pens yours?
Yeah, that's how.
What is that, steal them?
Oh, kudos.
All of them for like £1 from them.
Like, kudos?
Need some pens for the crossword puzzles for the social event tonight, and I was gonna have to go buy some, but I could just steal these.
Yeah, the Sharpies are not mine. They
Okay,
want
I won't steal the shirt.
the previous one.
Pens I will.
Than the previous tour. Quick note about the Sharpies. Those are not mine, so please don't steal them. Everything else I don't care about. You can steal the pens if you want, but not the Sharpies.
No, I steal the pens, so I require them.
Okay, Xander wants the pens.
Oh, 100%.
I clicked on the link, and I got the stuff is not available for location. And I'm so jet lagged that I get pissed off and go, why are you
Why bother?
like an hour and a half later, I go, oh yeah, I'm not home.
Oh, so that, okay, interesting.
It's like, yes, I see how the job, it's not available, it's candidate.
Am I wrong?
I don't know if it's the word or okay. Oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm gonna just +1 every time.
Template changes mid-release. Jesus Christ.
I didn't know we did that.
Yeah, this was really frustrating.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I've had an issue in SIG release, which just like been stagnant for 6 months, just like getting ignored. I can't get anybody to pay attention to it.
What issue?
I had an issue in SIG release about like we need to document this process, and just got no traction. I brought it up for the last 3 retros.
Oh, yeah, no, so there's, I got one.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make noise about it here because I want that document.
Stop.
So the, there's one about start finding things outside of the retro.
One's mine.
Yeah,
One's mine.
yeah, okay. Yeah, put a sticky note.
Yeah.
Stable roster worth revisiting.
We haven't talked about it.
never.
whatever about it, but I think we do have to talk about it.
Like even if it's a mistake,
Right.
it is a mistake, right? It should be.
But like looking at the entire concept of system safety, right? Like these teams were
Yeah.
mistake shine a light on
So he was
a
supposed to get like
place where we
t-shirts
can
and
have
stickers
some
and
sort of
stuff.
validation that was happening, right?
The
Like,
first time I've gotten
yeah.
anything released, and I've been on the
We have 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left, people. Yeah, if you want to come up and take a look at
yeah, it's apology. It's not any particular release.
plus ones and stuff.
Same sound, the same system. Yeah. That would actually be. That would be good. Yes, that's mine. No, I did. That's me. I got a pen. He's got a Sharpie. Oh, this one.
So many of these in miniature.
That should be the chairs.
They are often too busy and too overloaded to actually. It's our problem too. Yeah. Maybe it's
That's what they're supposed to
clarify
be.
with the city
Yeah.
that like this is something that is not an optional thing. They can't ignore us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that would probably be good too.
Learning how to delegate.
Unexpected PR version of PR. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
between.
All right, we are at the hour. I'll give people a couple more minutes to come and apply plus ones if they want, and let's group up stuff that looks similar, and then we will go from the most voted thing down.
That should be stopped. That should almost certainly be stopped. Exceptions on PR merging after code 3, that should be in stock.
That sounds
They're like, please, more of those.
Please roll back.
Love that. Kudos to your mission runner. Yes, last one. Those are all.
That's a 5. This is also a Okay, all right. Thank you, everyone, for putting forward your thoughts. I have gone through and looked at what's got a lot of plus ones, and we're going to go down in that order. We do have another microphone if people want to speak, so feel free to come up and grab it. The first thing to talk about with 5 plus ones plus the original ticket is unexpected PR merge while RC cut. Does anyone want to talk to this? CC, perhaps?
Yeah, I wrote this one. And yeah, as everyone know, I was the release manager for the past 127. And I found that after the code phrase in place, that is very, it requires people to label with the current milestone to be able to get the PR merged. And just there are too many people have this power, and sometimes like some of them lost track of the release calendar. So one thing I experienced is that while I'm cutting, I forgot RC0 maybe, and there is a PR merged at the same day, and nobody noticed the release team until I go ahead and found the PR. So yeah, and it was already too late at that point. So maybe we wanted to have some kind of mechanisms to kind of prevent people from doing so in the future. For example, add the release blocker kind of label to or release blocker kind of label required to be merged after code phrase, something like that.
All right. Anyone have any particular thoughts? I know you've already grabbed the mic.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Marco.
Can you pass them? Thank you.
Just to make sure that I understand, was that in the middle of cutting releases or that was before?
In the middle.
Okay. I will.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track there with there is an opportunity for us to address the mechanisms that allowed that to happen. That's the mechanical element. I think there's also the human element of potentially, and this very well could have been on me throughout the release, making sure that folks that have that milestone maintainer ability understand and are reminded that with great power comes great responsibility. And I know the folks that are working on the release engineering are already completely underwater with work. And so I'm sure that sounds great, right? Now you have to take the time to add this extra automation in place to do these checks with all the other stuff you're doing. So I think, that's the aspirational thing. But in the short term, I think we can also do some work to remind folks that you do have a great power in this, and you have the ability to cause a lot of work for a lot of people downstream by making a mistake like this. And yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that at the code phrase day, there are many PRs merged, and deadline is always powerful, I think. And so especially most contributors are not in the same time room. So sometimes the approver may give some comments at the gate day, at that day, and so this a small buffer may helps in such a RC release maybe. But the current status is very good. But only problem is that day we get some very neat comments. But it is if you don't have the permit, those PRs will not be merged.
I guess that's talking about different things. Oh, sorry. I guess this talked about a different issue than what we mentioned about for the RC card, because when we're doing RC card, the code phrase is already in place for more than a week. Yeah. So the code phrase thing is actually we have a 13 kind of mechanisms to do so, because we understand that a lot of reviews and might be happening at the very last day. So we don't immediately remove the PR from merging, but we will keep the PR merging even after code phrase as long as you have the approved label and the LGTM label in place. So that's kind of the things we did.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask one thing. When we are speaking about we should make sure that people are aware. I agree with that you shouldn't merge stuff. But what if we consider, let's say we are cutting releases and we consider blocking all merges in that? this is technically possible right now. So this is going to prevent concrete issue that was mentioned, for example, for RC1 cut, like we start release cut, we block all merges. When we are done, then we unblock it, like we do that for docs, for example. I think that it might be some pattern that we might want to look into for releases as well.
Yeah, I was gonna do a challenge for the class, essentially, like how do we stop it? Because there are a few measures in place right now, right? So one is code freeze, and no one's supposed to be merging. And I guarantee you, for the thousands of years that a lot of the people in this room have been cutting releases for Kubernetes, something will always go wrong. You could message the timelines a million times. You could create soft freezes, up freezes, warm freezes, cold freezes, thaws, and something will still go wrong based on timelines. No one is always watching the release timelines. So for merges to stop, we have to, so part of the reason that people have access to do milestone maintainership and stuff like that, like edit labels and whatnot, is because you needed to like edit comments and descriptions within the PRs. So one suggestion is to, we don't actively use the release blocker labels as much as we could be, right? And that can be an additional gate. Again, it's going to be on humans. Like we're kind of depending on humans to do the right thing. Save for removing access to the repo, like that would do it. Stripping access to the repo right before the cut, that would do it. But I do challenge the room to come up with a process.
I mean, the prow config has a list of, for each prow plugin, what GitHub groups have access to do that in what repos. One suggestion might be, after code freeze, drop the milestone maintainers group from being able to apply the milestone. And that wouldn't limit people who have repo access, but it could prevent a lot of accidental slips.
I do want to time box this, just to kind of go, we might not find a solution today. Marco, you wanted to say something as well? Sure, and then possibly wrap this up to move on to the next point. Thank you, everyone.
Does it make sense that we look into extending prow to disallow setting the current milestone if you're not, example, like in SIG release leads group? So because let's say that after code freeze, it doesn't make sense to set that label, like you can set 128, for example, but you can set 127 unless you're SIG release lead.
Yeah, and the other one I wanted to mention is that this is basically, we're talking about two problems. One, merges in during code freeze overall, and the other one was the one that we got in between while we were coding the release. So it's two kinds. One, we can like freeze merges altogether maybe somehow, but we need more process for the other one.
Okay, I think I'd like to stop this discussion here. Grace, can we make a note to bring this up possibly at a SIG release meeting? And then we can kind of talk about next steps on this one. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions on this. I'm just conscious of time, because in theory, we should end at 35 past. So our next biggest one, we have two actually that are quite similar. I think have a the same amount of stuff. I know they are different. Let's talk about cap templates. Stephen's here. Favorite topic. Start versioning cap templates or some other approach to avoid manual validations of headings, etc.
I did create an issue, and it's in the Kubernetes enhancements repository, and did bring this issue to the SIG architecture cap submeeting. It's probably the best place to comment +1. When I brought it, I think everybody was in agreement, and then nothing happened. So bump that again.
You wrote the same, right? Yeah. Yeah, just the root cause of that is self-explanatory, as going through the validation of the new enhancements. It's time-consuming and error-prone to go and validate that each single one conforms to the last version of the cap for two reasons. One, because there could have been a very recent change, which was the case in this release, like 1 week or a couple of days, and they are automatically out of sync. And second, because I imagine that if I was doing the cap myself, I could like press the wrong keys in Emacs and delete something. And obviously we are responsible for going through it, but it's the more manually it is, the more error prone it ends up being. So having this, at least this field that would enable us to automate this step, I think would be helpful.
So first of all, Emacs? No, I'm kidding. So this is another like enduring issue. We have a lot of fields that we've talked about in creating KEPs, and lots of discussions that have been effectively like closed or abandoned. There are talks about like scope, what's in tree, out of tree, whether they're policy, process, actual execution, feature sets within Kubernetes. But then there's work that I had done in the past, like to play around with like Q, for example, right, and integrating that into yes, we do need the short version. Yes, we do need versions, and we have a conversation of like this shape every release cycle. Who's going to do it?
Everyone was in agreement, and then nothing happened. I think I want that chiseled on my tombstone, just for the record.
Well, let's get it on record. 3851 in the enhancements repository.
All right. So, I mean, is there agreement that versioning cap templates is something that we want to do? Is there any dissent about that concept, at least in this room? Okay. Can we put an action item on someone to do that? I don't know, the group. On the note, actually, unless anyone has any further points on that particular one, the other one was tied with this, and I missed it, which is stop no KEP template changes mid-release, which, did someone want to talk to this specifically, or does this feel like the same sort of thing?
I added that one, and it was for the same discussions.
Okay.
Our template updates during the release.
I can't find that one, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay. Sorry, I probably can't read it. Okay. Did you want to say anything, CC, on the KEP templates updates or anything like that, or?
Yeah, that's okay. I guess that built into the similar topic as already.
Sure. Okay.
I think this is something that bites us a lot. I agree that we probably don't want to be doing any KEP template updates or PR template updates during the release, but we also have to keep in mind that between the releases, we're talking single-digit days. So without extensive planning, like that's going to fall apart. So I just keep that in mind. It's one of the things that we've struggled with in the past too when trying to reinvent the enhancements tracking process. Is like, oh, we can't do this during a release, but those windows are small. So like, we either have to figure out a way that makes it tenable to do that, or do extensive planning or something.
Yeah, you need the plan in place before the release hits, and to have the plan in place, you need some sort of skeleton of the release team to exist to execute on it. For the templates and versioning, what I would say is that what we could do is have the versions apply to the active version or the most recent version of the release. So like, oh, you're sub V1, then it's not going to apply until your release version 127 or something like that, right? And then that would give people a little bit of a window to get their templates back in line. How we do enforcement based on the versions instead of both the release versions, the active release versions, as well as the KEP template version. Right.
I just want to add a couple points from both the KEP author perspective and the PR shadow perspective. I was served as a PR shadow in the last release, so I reviewed a lot of PR sessions, and I've noticed that, like, for example, this release, Sergey go ahead and updated the PR section, like, before the release begins, added, like, for example, a question there, And it caused a lot of trouble because people just forgot to update, and we keep asking like you have to like keep your cap updated like before you can get the approval. But from like the cap author perspective, for example, I have a cap already in alpha and sitting there for a long time. And for this release, I just try to promote it to beta or try to promote it to stable. I don't automatically realize I have to apply the latest template into my cap because it's existing for quite some time. So maybe what I did is just added a bunch of like necessary kind of contents, which enough to support like my purpose of promotion. Yeah. So it's hard to deliver the message to the cap author also.
In part of that SIG architecture KEP discussion meeting and in the issue, I did propose having some sort of PR check to at least make sure that your KEP template is up to date as a signal to say, hey, maybe go and update it if we can't check all of the fields. So that might help with some of that. Okay. And then I guess in response to Xander's point, the time in between releases is short, but if we give them up until enhancement freeze to update the KEP, that is a much longer kind of runway. As long as they know they need to update it because there's new fields.
It's like I'm trying to not hold the mic. So you can merge a KEP at any time, and I feel like this fact is lost on teams in general. You can merge a KEP at any time, right? So people need to feel empowered to do that, so they're not running up against deadlines. Our deadlines are artificial, right? If you don't land your thing, you don't land, like, fine, okay. But we still have people randomly merging while we're cutting releases, and like it's all fake timelines, right? It's open source, right? But like you can merge a KEP at any time. You should be merging your KEPs when they're ready to go. It's not at a release boundary. Anytime.
Yeah, I want to add a fact that in the past that in the past release, over half of the KEP actually being raised in the last week of the deadline.
Okay. Did anyone else have anything to say on this point, or are we happy to just kind of say that we need to take the existing agreement and actually do it? Were you scratching your head, Joseph? Was that a... Okay, cool. Right. Okay. Going to close that one and move on to the next point. The next biggest one is actually a continue. Continue GitHub project boards. We have a giant pile of 4 post-it notes. So 4 people independently had this idea. Who wants to talk to it?
It's awesome, and so I'm going to say it anyway. Honestly, like, unbelievable shout out to Grace and Mark and Heba and the folks that made this happen. Like, it's been a pain point for the community for years, and finally a group of folks like stepped up and did this, and people are so thankful and happy for it. Like, you've really done an amazing thing for the community.
So like that, this is an example of we have so many of these ideas in backlogs and in various places. Like the templates are written out. Like there's a precise plan of how to execute on some things, and sometimes someone has to just go off and do it. Right. This is an example of people going off and doing the thing. I have wanted to burn the tracking sheets since I started on the release team and like 110, and nobody could push it out. So thank you.
I hated that spreadsheet 124. Yeah, okay. Yeah, big congratulations to everyone who pushed this. It was an amazing amount of work, and it really does make a difference having seen it under for release. Oh.
I think the board was initially built for enhancement, so interested to hear docs and bug triage have a different board, but like docs or other teams that like take data from enhancement and like how we can make the board better for them, because it's the enhancement lead job to create the board at this point.
Yeah, I think PRR, comms, and docs.
Yeah. Like all different teams like start to adopt to that.
Yeah, and I think the more than just a side note, more than just the boards, because the boards by themselves could be completely disconnected. I think that what's been really helpful is the way that the boards use information and provide a single source of truth for most stuff that happens, namely the enhancements. And that is what what I think really adds value is that enhancements are immediately reflected on everyone's view, and people can act more with more information.
All right. Did anyone else have anything else to say on this point of GitHub project boards? No? All right, we will move on. Next biggest is provide option of training, or this is a start, provide option of training for leads around learning delegation of tasks. Anyone want to talk to this one? Who wrote it? Did anyone write it?
So yeah, one of my observations is the younger people, the students, they don't really have any management training. So if we can help them teach them basics like delegation to the shadows as well, because sometimes you can feel like you should take on more work and they don't quite know the mechanism to push that work down. Also, it would help to provide positive feedback to the team as well if they're not performing or they're sort of lost interest. So we could possibly give them training just to help enable and push velocity of the team as well. So whether that's, you know, if they wanted to, some of us in our jobs, if we wanted to teach them and just show them how we do it, or maybe we could do it in the role book as well. I'm not sure how to implement that through, but yeah.
Yeah, this has been a tricky one. I agree, and I think it's I think there's like the open source that you do for work, the open source that you do for play, your actual job, and how you kind of execute on each of those functions, right? The way that you delegate at work is not going to be the same that you do it as you do in open source, right? And learning to, I think there are some implicit, or I mean rather explicit power structures at work, right? You have an org chart, you understand who does what, and you know your expectations through the lifetime of that job, right? With open source, it's a little different in that you may have some implicit power based on the role, but you don't actually have the authority to tell anyone to do anything, right? So it has to be kind of this network effect of like, wow, they're doing great work. I want to understand how they do that work. I think SIG Contributor Experience has this, you know, they've been working on that the mentorship program for chairs. So I think it'd be worthwhile to get together with them and understand some of the things that have worked in that program. I think we've got one person in the room in particular, Marco, who has been in school and has kind of risen through the release team and shadowing and being a release manager associate and now a release manager. Maybe Marco, you can lend some thoughts to this.
Yeah, I am personally pretty bad when it comes to handing over tasks, because sometimes it is sometimes you are sponsored to work on something by work, but sometimes it is limited or you don't have any sponsorship. So it is kind of hard. Like you have desire to work on something, but you just don't have time. And it is really hard to say like how to approach this situation. Maybe it is not really about training would be helpful as well, but maybe some sort of like process so that if you don't do that in some reasonable time frame that is like generous enough that someone else takes on it, because it is nice that for example, I could work on something that I want, but if that never gets done, then it is something that is a little bit problematic, because we are just going to stay at the same point forever. So it is a really tough topic, really hard one. So yeah, something that will probably need a more broader discussion.
I want to bring this to something that Kat actually has open for like 6 months now about what happens when a shadow doesn't fulfill their requirement, position, expectation. And so maybe it's not about role delegation, but the shadow doing the job that is outlined. So maybe I'll pass the mic to Kat if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, so currently if a shadow needs to be removed from the release team, whether it's because they want to step down or because they are not doing their job, they've disappeared, which happens, like with regularity, shadows disappear, right? We don't have a documented way to remove a shadow once we've decided that they have disappeared, and we also don't have a criteria for determining what constitutes like not doing your job as a shadow for any given team, which is unfortunate because this leads to the sub-team lead picking up that slack or overloading the remaining shadows, and then everybody is overworked because there is currently no clearly defined mechanism for removing and replacing a shadow mid-cycle. Usually what happens in my experience is the lead gets upset and goes to the release lead or the emeritus lead and asks what to do, and they're at that point informed that, oh, you know, you can remove them if you need to, but it shouldn't get that far, right? Like, we should know in advance that this mechanism exists. It should be clearly documented. And it shouldn't be existing as like kind of backroom knowledge that's handed down from lead to lead at the point that somebody is upset enough to go to the release lead about it. So there is an issue open in SIG release right now if anybody would like to go comment on it and help figure out how to document that process and what the criteria should be.
Yeah, so there's two things kind of here. So I'm going to jump to the first one, and then actually I'll probably jump to the second one. On the first one about kind of like, and I think what I heard earlier was that you were talking about like training for leads. You know, this probably sounds like something like a Contrabex I think would probably do, because there's probably a lot that they could probably do to help develop people and how, you know, especially if they're younger and they're, you know, how to act in open source. And I think that would probably be something I'd probably take that issue, and because I think beyond just the release team, I think it could benefit the community as a whole. But I also find that, you know, I always look at when it's release leads or teams were specific, I mean, there's a lot of wisdom that's come in. I always think about when Nabarun was a lead, and, you know, he was always like, do, delegate, defer. And I just loved how simple he made things, you know. And so there's a lot of tribal, and maybe that's what we're really talking about, maybe trying to codify some of that tribal knowledge and, yeah, you know, help guide, you know, leads or other individuals as they balance their roles. The offboarding thing, yeah, that's kind of another interesting topic. I know there's been times where, like, we lost somebody tragically, and then we had to just have a shadow step in, and then a lot of us try to guide him. Like, that was just an unexpected thing. I hope we never see that again. But then there's the other parts, like, and hopefully we don't see things where someone has to, but some people do have to step away. I think, James, I don't know of the intent when you originally were talking about like a pool, we kind of were kicking around an idea because we thought maybe we could recycle people through. I don't know if that's, you know, would be like that type of way to fill in and augment, but it's always so hard because it's such a short cycle too. So, but I do agree. There's not a real, like, we only have offboarding we have is just as a team, not individually.
So something I'm just going to propose now so that the issue doesn't get stale is maybe a system that we can use is the first occurrence or talk can be the sub-team lead to the shadow. If it continues to happen that the shadow cannot fulfill their expectation, then we can have the EA talk to the shadow. And then if that's like, if they're still not doing their job, then we can talk about removing them. So like kind of a 3-step process. And like maybe I can put that on the issue and like just have a starting point.
And one thing I wanted to say is, it's also, let's keep in mind that this is open source, and most people will try to do the rest effort. So I would, like, we have such a short cycle, and once you start working, it really flies once we start. So I would suggest, unless it's something like more concerning, do not overburn out on trying to offboard people. Like, the cycle will be over really quick. So, but
all right. It is 32 minutes past. I think we should probably end this one and do the last couple of bits. I guess we could take an action item to really kind of circle back to Kat's issue. and try to get this codified and actually written down, and especially before 128 properly kicks. Get an assignee? You'll do it? Okay, there we go. All right, we have 2.5 minutes. We're not going to get all of these, so I just want to highlight a couple of nice ones that we can talk about and all be happy about at the end. Kudos to image promotion improvement. Anyone want to talk to this one? Anyone?
Yeah, I wrote this one, and I really appreciate the work. Adolfo and a couple others did for like the image promotion stuff. As everyone knows, and as everyone might be aware of, like we were running into like the signature issues and all related issues like while this release in the middle of the release, and I think people did an amazing job to improve the image promotion process to be specifically, and it's kind of improved from like a couple hours to now less than 1 hour, I think. Yeah, that's a great improvement. Yeah.
That is great. Congratulations. Yeah, congratulations on everyone who worked that one. Anyone else have anything to say on that one? All right. Next. Thank you.
You gotta just turn on the bottom.
Idiot. That's why. User error. There we go. Anyway, right. Next, enhancement onboarding docs plus initial meeting was very helpful. Anyone?
Thanks. So yeah, I wrote that one. It was my first time shadowing, and I didn't really know what I was getting into. But after like the first meeting, so I'd read, before applying, I like skimmed through the docs, but I still didn't really have a good understanding of what enhancement really did. But it was like, oh, I can read about the new enhancements in 127. Sounds fun. But I think the initial meeting, just walking through like an example from 126 and the new project board really made it easy to understand like what issues you're assigned to, like what enhancements you're assigned to, what the template is. And it felt like a team effort because like we'd meet during like the code freeze and the enhancements freeze to go through everything. So it felt like I was part of a team, not just like doing my own thing. So and I was able to start really quickly. So that was also good because enhancement like the freeze happens fast.
Yeah, and we are to time. Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to collect up. Thank you very much, Grace, for taking notes. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. We're going to collect up the rest of this stuff, and we're going to put it somewhere, hopefully useful, and we'll go from there. No. Yeah, markers back to me, please. I need to return them. I don't care about the pens. And the pens to Xander. Yeah, Xander needs the pens. Thank you very much for coming, everyone.